Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the last segment of the mid-morning show. Your host, Zahira Bam Ismail, will now be chatting to a representative, the Cape Town manager, Idrissa Ebrahim of Africa Muslim Agency, to give us insight into the Orphan Hope initiative. Idrissa, assalamu alaikum and welcome to the studios.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having us today, Zahira.
It's such a pleasure to have you on. When I talk about Africa Muslim Agency and we talk about the work that is being done by your organization and your teams, it's always hands-on. It's teams directly on the ground. It's not just being reported back. And I think to have that accountability, to have that transparency and feedback makes such a huge difference. Idrissa, I know that one of the places, that many may have already forgotten about has been Afghanistan. But Africa Muslim Agency hasn't forgotten about Afghanistan. Tell us about the work that you're currently doing with orphan children in these communities.
Thank you so much, Zaira, and welcome to all the listeners who have tuned in today. So, currently in Afghanistan, we had the opportunity to go there just before Ramadan to do some assessments on the ground. But nothing in the world can prepare one for when you arrive in Afghanistan. One of the things that strikes you most is the hunger crisis that is so visible on the streets. You have families who are hungry, you have children who are hungry, you have widows and orphan families living in extreme poverty. And that is the first thing that you actually, when you arrive, it is something that becomes so prevalent that the hunger in Afghanistan is something that is not very widely spoken about. And I think if one looks statistically at the poverty lines across the world, Afghanistan ranges in a poverty line of about 90 to 95% of the population living beneath the basic food right that people have an entitlement to. So the hunger crisis is something that I would really just emphasize. People are really, really hungry in Afghanistan, and particularly in Kabul, where we visited. We were taken by our team, and this is the most incredible team. I want to pay a moment of respect to the team who do the work on the ground there as well. Kabul is not an easy place to traverse, because it's a very hilly area and mountains, villages, and they go from the lower end of the mountain to the higher end of the mountain. And we have one team member in particularly who literally walks by foot to find families. And what strikes me about her doing this is, how do you choose when basically everybody within that vicinity, is as needy as the family next door? But this young lady manages to profile families, and one family is even more desperate than the other family for just the basic right to food and shelter. So Afghanistan Orphan Hope project is a project that is very, very close to my heart. I do have a lot of love for women and children, and to see the improvement in their lives. And when we do get a sponsorship coming through for Afghanistan, it is like, you have saved an entire nation by saving just one family, because invariably that widow has suffered tremendous loss, losing perhaps family members, the males in her family, whether it be her father, her husband, her sons. Afghanistan's been in conflict for the longest time ever, for 40 years at least. So women within that context have only known war, and have known hardship, and have known the need to actually provide and to sustain a family and their children. That for me is something that stands out for me for Afghanistan completely, Zaira. It is something that only when you have been, and when you have seen, and when you have sat with these families, do you really understand the difficulty that these families go through on a daily basis. It is perhaps one of the biggest tragedies that we are experiencing, with all the other global tragedies in the world.
And, I think that always comes home for me to say that, we really, as a community and as a society, cannot make tragedies fashionable, that you follow it while it's hitting the news headlines, forget about it, and then continue with your life. Because, like you're saying, Afghanistan has been the women in that area and community not necessarily have only lost one male breadwinner. In some households, there's absolutely no males at all because all the males have been lost in these horrific wars that have devastated Afghanistan. And now you have these young girls in those homes as well. Idrissa, when you talk about the sponsorship that goes to make a difference, that changes the lives of these children, of these communities at large, what is the impact? Have you actually seen the impact and the change directly with regards to what a sponsorship does for these children? We speak about hunger, but how else does it change their lives? We're putting food on the table. What else does the sponsorship do for them?
So, Zaira, if I can contextualize it for you, the families who are profiled invariably have several young girls within their home. And with the African Muslims Agency Orphan Hope sponsorship, automatically, if the children are still at school going age, they are allowed to attend perhaps the primary level of school. It gives them the basic education. The sponsorship will cover basic food for them, perhaps their rent, perhaps access to transport if the mother needs to go somewhere, and very, very maybe basic health care if they need to attend the hospital. So the sponsorship just takes care of the bare minimum and the basics, but that is better than absolutely nothing. Once the
Mm,
family has been profiled and becomes a donor, there is a donor assigned to this family, the team then put them onto the broader database where they will receive perhaps in winter a winter pack, which is vital in the absolute cold, during the winter months in Afghanistan. And in Kabul, in particular, in those mountains, it is freezingly cold. So they will qualify for that winter pack, which is supported by donors, who make it possible for families to receive that. Then they have the Bread of Hope program, which is a program that has been very close to my heart. Having been there and witnessed women standing in icy cold lines to receive some bread has been something that has been etched in my mind and will remain with me for the rest of my life. Particularly somebody who could be my mom under this threadbare
mm,
burqa, who's standing there not having a voucher, a bread voucher, for example, but equally hungry as everybody else in that queue. So the Bread of Hope project is also something that the families automatically will qualify for. This would include the Ramadan hamper, the food baskets that are prepared. And we were part of that project when we were there, being able to actually hand out the food projects to some of the families, on the day that they had to come and receive. It was the most unbelievable feeling of being able to assist families going into Ramadan, knowing that at least that evening or that day or that month, there would be something for them to eat and perhaps even share with their neighbors. In addition to that, Zaira, they will qualify for the Qurbani that is done within Afghanistan. It is the one time of the year that they will have maybe the taste of fresh meat that is going to be a witness for them to maybe witness the Qurbani, be present for it, or perhaps
mm,
maybe the team will come and bring them a parcel of meat. Then when you look at all the young girls within that family as well, they will benefit from a dignity kit. And this dignity
mm,
kit has all the hygiene aid and tools for these young girls, to be able to have some measure of dignity, to be able to bath, to wash, to have access to even a hairbrush for that matter, to be able to brush their hair. So when you're looking at the Orphan Hope program in the reality of what it brings to a family, it is far greater than just the sponsorship. But the sponsorship is what is required just to get the family, into some form of assistance on a monthly basis, because they paid out monthly to the families. The families come to the office, they come and they collect it. If they live too far away from the office, the team actually goes and takes it to that area to ensure that the family is taken care
mm.
for that month and for that entire year. So Zara, just to put into when you talk about the child marriages,
Yes, I was
when
just about to say, yeah, sorry,
hmm,
I was just about to ask you to say to you that, you mentioned now why it's so important for these sponsorships, because we literally have somebody going around there choosing one or two people that can benefit from it when we know there's entire communities that require this assistance. My question to you is, when we talk about the Orphan Hope project and its impact and what a difference it's made for these families, we also know that in this community, child marriages is a huge issue. How has the Orphan Hope project combated, or rather assisted, in alleviating that difficulty or that problem?
When a mother has to make the decision on a day, for example, who and which child to feed for lack of food, and one can only think about this, in terms of utter desperation, and an opportunity comes for the child to be married off and to maybe, be looked after by another family. That becomes the easiest option for the mother to release maybe her daughter. But when you have them as part of the Orphan Hope project, that immediately eases the burden on the mother in terms of the fact that the family are now taken care of. The very
Mm.
basics that are needed by that family are being provided by donor sponsorship. And this alleviates the burden upon the mother of having to make that decision. Once the girl goes to school, she will at least get a primary education. She will learn to read and learn to write, and she will not just sit at home and absolutely just become the invisible girl, which is invariably what happens within these societies, because there is no other option for the girl. With the team in Kabul, there is also an ability for them to go and learn to sew. There's a sewing class that is done. They learn the skills of sewing, lace making, crafts, handicrafts. When we were there, we actually had an opportunity to purchase some of the items that were brought,
Alhamdulillah.
for Our Ladies delegation to see. And it warms the heart to see how creative people can become when given the opportunity. When the basic
Absolutely.
of taking care of food, for example, is lifted from the shoulders, of the mother or the young girl, they can develop their skills. They can develop, maybe if they have a hobby for it,
Mm.
for that matter. One of the things I want to actually raise and bring to this discussion is, when Hafiz Hassan was there about 2 Ramadans ago. This is a story that has completely stayed with me. He was taken during his trip to visit a family in the foothills of Kabul. And while he was visiting this family, the neighbors came and showed the team to a home, a little mud hut where 4 sisters were living. They were just 4 ladies. They had no male support. They didn't even have anybody who was able to come to bring food to them, as a male person in their family. And this was during Ramadan, and all 4 sisters were sitting side by side. They had actually died. They had died of hunger. And this is something that I think we have to remember, that this kind of hunger and poverty, it can be alleviated by support and shown, to families in Afghanistan, particularly 4 sisters like that. 4 of them lost their lives, subhanAllah. So to come back
Idrissa,
to,
yeah,
mm,
I think, you're mentioning these points, and I think it's so hard to not be affected by it, because as much as we hear about it, the reality that being faced on the ground is so dire and so difficult for so many people. I have a quick question to ask you, and then I will conclude the program. But in terms of the amount it costs to take care of an orphan in Afghanistan.
so right now the actual cost per annum is 15,000, but it includes so much more than that 15,000. It is the gift.
Yes.
It is the gift to those families who will receive it, and that is an annual sponsorship. I always call upon the donor to renew it and renew it and renew it, because as
Mm.
the family grows, their needs grow. And this is something that we must remember. Sometimes it's good if you have it just to do a once off, but there is always the commitment to the widow and her orphan children, because who else can she turn to?
That's it. So, Idrissa, Jazakallah so much for joining us on air. I think you mentioned so many important topics in terms of what a difference this makes into the lives of others. And I really want to thank you for it before I close off. Jazakallah to you and Africa Muslim Agency for being here, for sponsoring and being a part of all the initiatives that look after women, not just locally, but internationally as well. And we look forward to touching base with you in the future as well. That's Idrissa Ebrahim from Africa Muslim Agency in Cape Town. And I think what's important to know note is when you're doing a sponsorship donation, as Idrissa mentioned, it's not just a donation that goes, it's a donation that changes the life of a family, it's a donation that changes the life of a community. And it goes such a long way to making a difference because it's not just food on a table, it's so much more than that. And when we talk about what Allah has blessed us with and what Allah has given us, it's also about what are we doing with it? How are we giving back? And I'm almost 100% certain if you contact Idrissa after this at the African Muslim Agency offices in Cape Town and you say to her, this is the only amount I can sponsor, or this is the only amount I can put to it, I promise you, she will pull a few people together and she will help you find a family that you can support and sponsor. So don't sit there thinking, I don't have this, I can't sponsor it. Make an effort, put something together, and I promise you, it goes a long way. The reason you're hearing this, the reason you're listening to this, Allah has planned it. Don't just ignore it. Go forward with it, and let's try and make a difference in the lives of others. I always, when I hear these stories and I hear how women are affected across the globe, you realize that it's not just a nuclear problem or a nuclear difficulty. This is something we're finding across the globe, and Muslim women all over are going through immense difficulties. And the only reason you and I are sitting on this end and not on that is truly by the mercy of Allah. Our circumstances can change in an instant. And while you are in this position, do as much as you can to help another woman, because we have no idea if one day we will be in the position where we need the assistance. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always put people there who are able to assist and able to help. And may we be of the people who are able to assist and able to help. I think it has been a full on discussion from the time we started this conversation to the difficulties that women are facing, from psychological aspects of abuse to being abused by the systems that have also been put into place, how we find the reprieve, how we find people to assist us. And now we've ended it with also understanding how we can be of assistance and how we can help people who cross our paths. Nothing is by chance. Nothing is by coincidence. There's a reason why every discussion and every conversation is had. May it always reach the hearts of those who need to hear it the most. Jazakallah so much for joining me on today's show. I look forward to joining you back again tomorrow morning. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.